Would you love to own some Bowers & Wilkins 800 series speakers? Of course you would. It's one of our industry's most iconic brands, and the 800s are their flagship series. But realistically, is it within your budget? For a lot of folks, the answer to that question is no. The good news is that all of the lessons that Bowers & Wilkins have learned in manufacturing the 800 series in its current iteration, those benefits have flowed down into the 700 series at much more affordable prices. Today, we're going to take a look at the Bowers & Wilkins 705 S3. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Joe with Gramophone, and Bowers & Wilkins have done a terrific job of bringing those high-end benefits from the 800 series into this much more affordable 700 series. So today we're looking at the 705 S3, and this product really has a wonderful performance for the money. Let's start looking at some of the benefits that it has versus the previous series too. So the first thing that you'll notice, I think, is that the cabinet is now curved. That's got some really significant benefits because it brings this 6.5-inch driver out slightly from the front of the cabinet. It's not recessed or flush with the front baffle. The main benefit of that? Well, it changes the first reflection point. Try this at home. Have a friend of yours just put their hands up to their mouth and continue to speak. When you take your hands away, you can automatically hear how much more natural the sound is because it's not bouncing off something right next to it. Here, the first reflection point of the music that's coming from this driver is going to be somewhere in the room, not on the cabinet itself. The benefit when you're listening to music, you get this much more open and natural, as though you were there with the violin player standing right in front of you playing kind of a thing, versus that the music's coming from a box kind of an effect. There is another benefit as well to this curved front baffle. With the driver out just a little bit, the whole cabinet can be slimmer. So there's some sonic benefit there, but there's also an aesthetic benefit. This is really a pretty compact speaker. And a smaller speaker typically will fit into a room more easily, kind of less dominating its surroundings than a bigger speaker. So both acoustical and aesthetic benefits. Now let's talk a little bit about a new driver that actually took Bowers & Wilkins 8 years and over 70 iterations to get to the point where we see it now in the finished product. This is what they call their Continuum driver, and it replaces the older Kevlar that Bowers & Wilkins have used for decades. Why did they go to so much trouble, spend so much time and energy developing Continuum? Because this woven cone is actually both lighter and stiffer than the Kevlar that it replaced. So it's capable of moving back and forward, reproducing notes more cleanly with less distortion. What are you going to hear due to the Continuum driver? Well, any instrument, let's just pick a guitar, an acoustic guitar for example, when you hear those notes plucked, you're going to hear them more cleanly and with less distortion than you would have if they had just continued to use a Kevlar driver. Now let's talk about the part of the driver that you wouldn't see if you compared this to the S2. The Continuum has what they call a biomimetic suspension. Let's talk suspension for a second. Remember that this thing moves. Just like with your car, you don't want to be bouncing down the road. You want to be going smoothly. So this rubber surround helps to keep movement under control, but inside there's also what we call a spider, which usually has been a piece of cloth that generally has ridges in it, and that spider is helping to keep the whole thing moving in a linear fashion as well. In the biomimetic suspension, however, that's been replaced by a space-age material. The cloth fiber spider is gone. And again, you get a lower distortion response from the driver because it's moving in a more linear fashion, which is what we want. Linear movement, not wobble, like you would have gotten with the older cloth-based or paper-based spider. We've turned the 705 S3 around so we can take a look at the back panel because there's some impressive things back here as well. First off, this set of binding posts kind of looks like it belongs on about a $10,000 pair of speakers. They're absolutely beautiful. And you notice, of course, that you've got the ability in this speaker to bi-wire or bi-amp, depending on if that's the sort of thing that you want to do with them. Secondly, let's talk about the capacitors in the crossover network that you can't see from here. They've upgraded to some Mundorf capacitors. What's the benefit of the higher quality capacitors in the crossover network? This is a really quiet speaker from the perspective of if you're listening to music that sort of has space in the music. So not a dozen different instruments all jumbled on top and pounding away, but an acoustic piano or acoustic guitar, let's say. You'll hear that this is actually a lower distortion, quieter speaker overall because of the upgrades that they made in the crossover network. A third thing is that the port is slightly different. It's just a little bit more flared. And they actually give you the ability to tune the 705 S3 to your room. So if, for example, you have the speaker, obviously with a port in the back and a speaker on the front, it's radiating bass in both directions. If you've got the speaker up against the wall, it might benefit you to take this little foam plug that they include, and you'll change the frequency response of the speaker a little bit based on now you've got the port somewhat blocked. This is literally one of those, once you've got the speakers set the way you like them, give it a try and see if the sound gets better or worse. At Gramophone, we really appreciate your support. If you can, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe. That helps us out a lot. Feel free to leave a comment in the comments section as well, and click that little bell icon so that you'll always be notified of our upcoming content. Another big reason why the 705 S3 is such a leap forward in performance from the S2 is what they've done with the tweeter. Now, in the 800 series we already referenced, they've got the diamond tweeters, and those are fantastic tweeters, but they're also very costly to produce. So here we've got a 1-inch carbon dome, and the carbon replaces the previous aluminum tweeter that they had in the S2. So this is a really nice upgrade from the S2. The high frequencies are a little bit less peaky, smoother, a little bit easier to listen to. So a nice leap forward in performance there. Also, we referenced earlier that the driver is just a little bit forward of the cabinet, and the same thing here with the tweeter. So we talked about this wide open kind of an image that just sounds so natural, almost like you're there at the blues or jazz club with the performers. It's partly because both the tweeter and the driver are now liberated from the front baffle, and you just get this wonderful open dispersion pattern. Again, a nice upgrade. So here's another reason why this speaker has such a wonderful frequency response and sounds so musical. They've changed the tweeter housing considerably. You've seen on the 800 series how the tweeter housing can be really pretty long. This is a much longer housing than what they had before. They actually manufacture this out of a solid aluminum billet. It's extremely non-resonant because it's so rigid. Why are they doing this? Well, let's talk about what's happening at the tweeter itself. The dome is just like a driver moving forwards and backwards. You don't really see it, but the tweeter dome is doing the same thing. That backwards motion, because obviously when it produces a note, it's got to move back. That backward motion creates a sound wave that, if it's just bouncing off the back of the cabinet, will then come forward through the tweeter. By using this long, sleek aluminum billet, they've got a way to disperse that high frequency energy that's traveling like so. What you wind up hearing are the front wave, what the tweeter is actually doing to create the note, not so much the back motion. They've also got it resting on this decoupling mount right here. In other words, they've completely freed up the tweeter from the restraints and restrictions of what you would get in an inexpensive speaker where the tweeter's flush with the front of the cabinet. They've really gotten rid of that energy. The sonic benefit, therefore, is you get, again, this very open and natural and not boxy, we could say, kind of a sound quality. So what do you hear when you actually sit and listen to a pair of 705 S3s? Well, we've already referenced it several times, but the probably biggest characteristic that you'll notice is that the sound stage is just so big and expansive. This is a relatively compact speaker, but it sounds like a much, much bigger speaker because that sound stage, that sense of listening to a live performance is so present to you. So that's benefit number one. Secondly, I would say clarity and transparency. This is a very clear, clean, undistorted kind of a performance. There are plenty of good boxed, stand-mounted loudspeakers, you could say, and maybe a $499 a pair range. When you listen to this versus something that's less expensive, it's so apparent that this is a more accurate reproduction of the music. I would say this is a very revealing speaker. So if you've got a great sounding recording, it'll sound great. If you've got a very poor sounding recording, it will reveal those deficiencies in the recording, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So now that we've talked about the clean, clear, high frequencies and the wide open imaging, let's talk about the bass response a little bit. It is, I would say, stunningly good from such a compact product. You can tell by the way I'm holding it here that this is not a physically big speaker. You're not necessarily expecting great bass performance, but the bass notes are really good, clean, clear, tight. Love the bass that this product is generating. Now, having said that, if you're a bass freak, you're probably gonna either want to match up the 705 S3 with a good subwoofer, or two, because twin subwoofers are always gonna be able to accomplish things in your room that you can't accomplish with one, or just consider the tower models in this series, because the 702, 703, and 704 all share a lot of the sonic characteristics that we've just described, but they're floor standers. So by definition, they're going to give you more of that bass that you crave, again, if you're a bass fan. I think for a lot of people, especially in a smaller room, the bass response is going to be just fine exactly as it is. But just remember, if you're a bass fan, you'll want to consider either the addition of subwoofers or moving into one of the towers in the 705, 704, 703, 702 sequence. To sum up the 705 S3, Bowers & Wilkins did a great job with this speaker. There are so many upgrades to the previous product. It looks really cool, for one thing. Secondly, for such a compact speaker, it's got a big open sound stage. This is a very low distortion reproducer of music. It's got surprisingly good, clean, tight bass. And I think for a lot of people, this is exactly what they're looking for. It's priced at $33.95 for the pair. If that's a little too rich for your blood, remember that there is a, again, stand-mounted or bookshelf type 706 and 707 that are a little bit less money respectively than this one, as well as the 702, 3, and 4 stand or floor standers that we referred to earlier. Bravo, Bowers & Wilkins. You've done a great job of taking 800 series benefits and boiling them down into a much more affordable and yet really satisfying package. For more information about Bowers & Wilkins and all of our great brands, please visit us at gramophone.com and check out Sky by Gramophone, where you'll always get a secure checkout with fast and free shipping straight to your door, so you can pick up your own pair of 705 S3. We'd love to visit with you if you can, so please come visit us in Timonium, Columbia, and Gaithersburg, Maryland. If you're able to visit the Timonium store, make sure you stop by right across the parking lot and see our Experience Center, where you will see some fantastic products in an absolutely beautiful setting. And check out our Kitchen Design Center as well, just a few miles north in Hunt Valley. Thank you for spending time with us today. We look forward to seeing you soon.